altijd werkt.
Je kan het via iemand desktop, zet je hem op een artscomputer aan. Dan werkt dat in ieder geval.
Nou, afgezien van de kamer.
Ja.
Het is ook eigenlijk niet mijn taak om dit te doen. Dus alleen als we hier komen, dan hoor je niet op de...
Ik zou bijna denken dat we...
Oh fuck, we streamen al. Sorry.
Skamp in Nederland.
Jawel.
Oh, wel.
Verstaan wel redelijk.
Good
Dat
enough.
vertel je nu pas.
Zegt ze ook nooit. Dan schat ze er altijd.
She hears everything.
It's amazing, this island here. Floating houses here, they're amazing.
Mm. Yeah, it's a nice mix of...
Do you live here?
Yes. Yeah, these 3 floors are shared space of our living community. And then, like, on the top, this block, we have 6 apartments where we live with 8 people. So we have quite a bit of space.
Wow, yeah.
And this space we use for public.
You mean this space here?
Yeah, this space, this room. We have it's called a giveaway shop.
Oh, okay.
So anyone can bring stuff. Most important, anyone can take stuff. So if you see like a nice warm thing that you need, take it.
I can just take it.
Yeah. Oh. It's kind of anti-consumerism, recycling, pro-recycling kind of thing.
That's too small for me.
That count? Yeah, it's probably too...
Alright. So, for some reason, I cannot see anything on this screen. But I'm hearing from one of our 2 viewers.
2 viewers?
Do we have 2 viewers?
Oh man!
Already.
Nice.
We're highly successful. That we are visible, but yeah, let's just put it here.
We just have to ask feedback.
And we'll hope that this is visible. Let us know if this is all okay.
Alright.
Is there? How does the chat window thing work? Does anybody else have a laptop here?
I do.
Maybe you can log in and see what's happening on the feed.
But can't you just click chat?
Yeah, you should be able to. But I don't. Oh, there.
It's good. You are very visible.
Happy Jarrell. That's Gleb is there and Yaniv is there.
Alright.
Awesome.
Voorzichtig schenken. Anders moet ik een doekje pakken.
Dat is inderdaad.
Dat was wel aan de snelle kant. So, first 15 minutes is just us pouring our drinks.
We're gonna do some performance art now.
Yeah. Improvised and everything.
We're doing very well on the tea.
Want tea?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Seem to be expert pourer here.
Well, then you might as well.
Pourer.
Right. So welcome everybody to our theekransje. So this is now the 9th?
I think so, yeah.
At least you noticed it as number 9.
Yeah, so it's the 9th think tank session. Small group this time, which might give us an opportunity to go a little bit deeper into the subject. Perhaps. Compared to having groups of like 10 or more people. And
see it as an opportunity rather than...
Yeah, indeed. So today we're talking about re-examining the artists in a world full of media hype.
It's artistic quality.
Oh, yeah, artistic quality, that was the word.
It's redefining artistic quality in a world where everybody can build stuff, I think. Or
equal access and the sort of hyped way that things are being presented nowadays. So maybe we can still, like, for all the viewers, although we know all of them, but maybe for people who will view this later on, give a brief introduction of who we are, and then just get started.
Sure.
So, Martijn,
I'll start. I'm Martijn. I studied at the HKU. Probably at least like you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about you, but
You'll find out.
all right. I studied music technology, but these days I am a game designer and a game programmer, which I do on a freelance basis, and I also create my own game, which I've released about a month ago. And that's it in a nutshell.
I'm Mariah. Hello. I'm a freelance interactive sound artist and hardware, software developer, researcher. I studied in a number of places between Delft, The Hague, Berlin and Montreal. And I've been doing quite a few large projects that are still touring. That's it.
and also hosting here from
Yes. Yes, and I'm providing the space together with my living community to Soundings.
Yes. So I'm Thijs. I'm one of the members of the Soundings collective that hosts these think tank sessions. I'm also studying at the HKU. I'm going for my master's in sound art, and in sound I mostly focus on installations and performance of live electronics, and I'm basically interested in everything that has to do with programming for sound and stuff like that.
And I'm Kiri. I'm a music design student in my master's at the HKU at the KMT. I'm also a composer, a pianist, and a researcher in collaborative improvisation and performance. That's what I do.
All right.
Okay. So, quick question. Who suggested this topic?
Unfortunately, the person who suggested this topic isn't present here. It's Jonathan Reus of Stein.
I was doing a master in art and science in The Hague at the moment.
Oh, wow.
So that's his background. But I think we can sort of take the liberty of just discussing on our own terms. So I don't know exactly what the trigger or the reason was for him to post this topic, but I do definitely feel like there's this huge difference between what I'm trying to achieve in art, like when I really want to work on a piece of art, and a lot of stuff that's happening like on a much more commercial basis, and it sometimes feels like both worlds need very different sort of approaches for it to flourish and for it to work. But when I was feeling that a number of people are sort of judging the more artistic stuff as if it is like sort of more hype based or more something that's tailored for a lot of people. Like they use the same kind of requirements or something like for it, although it cannot be really compared in real life.
So there's two different mindsets, one for commercial works, one for art works, and you feel that a lot of people mistake one frame of mind and using it to judge the other. and
Yeah.
that might not work.
Yeah, exactly. I have the feeling that yeah, that's sometimes that kind of stuff happens, and I'm trying to think of examples.
Do you think this has anything to do with more and more people being able to create things, with a rise in the democratization of tools, or is it a parallel issue? And if it's connected, how is it connected?
I do think it's connected. I do think that a lot of people get introduced to these really tailored tools to create certain things, and the tools are designed to make it really easy to achieve something that's worthwhile, or that at least sounds cool or looks cool.
Examples?
Well, there's a lot of these from the Magic Music Makers type of. They basically started that, but there are more and more applications for iPad, and you just get these programs where you just have to hit a few things, or just tap a little bit, and whatever you do, something cool sounding comes out. And those applications give you the feeling that you're actually doing this.
I think someone should actually watch the stream as well.
Who?
I'm channeling Pinar, apparently.
And Happy Drell says, I tend to agree with Thijs.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that it makes for the user, it makes it feel like they're doing the work, and it's really easy what they're doing, and they sort of take that mindset, and they sort of forget that there's an entire process behind that application that's invisible to the actual user, like all the synthesis stuff and all the die-hard programming stuff that's already done for you. And in more artistic projects, a lot of artists tend not to use these pre-made units or pre-made applications because they want more control over what they're doing exactly. And so it requires a larger amount of knowledge and experience to be able to create such a thing. But the users don't really see it because they just think okay, well, I can make this with my iPad. So what he's doing is probably something similar.
Okay, so to make this more concrete, some 15-year-old kid discovers Fruity Loops, built his own little drum and bass loop, and then he listens to your stuff and he thinks, oh, well, I know how that's made.
Yeah, but they don't really know what's under the hood of what they're doing themselves.
Is that important?
It is important for
whom?
To be able to see the craftsmanship of what somebody's doing, and also not even craftsmanship, but the whole think process that you go through, like the sort of design choices that you make are on a completely different scale than if you just use more ready-made.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you could still. I mean, there's nothing against sort of consciously making use of ready-made tools. If those tools are what you want to do, and it's a conscious choice to use that tool because it's very good at that. I mean, there's absolutely no problem there, as long as you're aware of the limitations of that tool.
Yeah, but knowing the limitations of that tool already requires the entire step of knowing what's happening under the hood.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't use those tools. I mean,
no, it's not the tools, but it's the sort of. I mean, those tools are really good at what they do, for one, and they're just interesting and playful. But they sort of. It sort of mystifies what's happening underneath, and the thing that's happening underneath is usually quite vital and important to people who are
But that's not how artists work. It's like they have these hidden recipes and these hidden methods that don't really show in performance, like this whole thing that is hidden and it adds the magic to the work.
Yeah, but these sort of applications make it seem like that the application is all there is, and because all that magic that you refer to that you for instance see in performances like make things seem easy. How do I say this? That is already like, even if you go to a really good play and it looks like really easy, you still know that it's really hard to make it look like that.
I'm not sure that you do. Some people might see that, some others might not. And many different people will see many different aspects of the performance that are hidden underneath the surface. And I doubt any two people would see it in exactly the same way and to the certain depth, to the same depth.
No, of course.
There's quite a few comments on that.
Oh shit, I have to take it from...
We have to keep up with this.
No, Pinar said like democratization of the technology is good for... It allows basic craftsmanship to come back in the sense that people are introduced to hands-off electronics, etc. However, in larger scale, the drawback is you are losing the quality assessment measures.
I guess you can actually also invert the argument that you're making. I mean, because everyone has access to these tools, they actually know how hard it is to make.
Yeah, you could argue that working with these tools gives you some limited amount of insights into the process versus having no insight into the process of creating anything. It certainly worked that way for me when I started out.
Yeah, but it's only, I think, a really small fragment of those who actually take it a step further and really dive into it. And there's only like, I think it's a minority who at a certain point thinks, yeah, but what's really happening here? Why do I hear this if I do this?
But that's the same for a lot of things. I think a good question to ask is, does having access to these tools actually hurt your ability to have insight into an artistic process? Or does it help sometimes, but not always?
I think both, because it's really dependent on who.
I mean, I play the piano, but if I see someone who's really a professional piano player, I'm like, wow, he really knows how to do it.
But does the fact that there are like people who play the piano better than you affect the way you enjoy playing the piano?
No, I mean, I play the piano for my own reasons. I mean, and I imagine that's like someone who's at home making tracks with the software that he has is just as happy doing that and still enjoying like the professional artists who do this for a living.
I'm trying to come back to these two mindsets. We talked about the artistic mindset and the commercial mindset, where I guess what we mean by commercial is the more consumeristic kind of approach, which involves entertainment, I guess, where these kind of apps you described fall into, like making things easy to approach, easy to create, therefore you enjoy more, you have easier access to tools, therefore you get more enjoyment through making and you don't have to think a lot. But is that a bad thing? I mean, some people don't want to just sit all the hours and learn how to script. They just want to have fun with their music.
I think that's perfectly acceptable. It becomes more like a video game, and you just do this for yourself, and you maybe share the tracks with your friends who also use the application. but maybe you don't even have the intention of becoming a stage performer or
Yeah,
or making an album.
I was trying to come to that word, intention. So maybe what makes different these kind of processes is the intention that drives them. If you have the intention of expressing something that is really deep, but not in the melodramatic way, then you really need to look deep into your practice, into your discipline, and you have to find the tools yourself. But if the intention is to just play music with your friends in your living room, or make a song about your mother and you're 15 years old, then it sort of changes the whole process you have to go through. So maybe that's a measure for evaluating, to come back to the original question, like what is artistic quality? You cannot measure artistic quality in the same basis for all these niche, these areas.
It all depends on the
Yeah,
context that the
it
work
depends.
is created in.
It depends on who is making it, for what reason, I guess.
Yeah, but that's exactly the sort of thing where I have the feeling that it sometimes leaks like from one area to another area. There's still new stuff coming.
No, Pinar says, I think people are bothered by this. What? Because they see easy work being rewarded too easily.
Yes, you perhaps you worked on an album for a year and you put a lot of effort into that, and you worked on all the details. You coded all the synthesizers yourself, worked out the composition yourself, perhaps on paper or something. And it was really laborious, and you're exhausted, but you're really happy with it. And then somebody who had access to a more advanced tool that you perhaps weren't aware of created something that's kind of like what you made. It's not as deep as what you made. It sounds kind of like it, and people tend to judge them in the same way. And they say, well, that's about just as good as what you created, even though you put in so much more effort and understand your tools so much better. That can be frustrating, and I've seen parallels in the game industry where animation tools and 3D modeling tools are becoming ever more advanced, and it's now much more easier to create something that's really aesthetically pleasing. And some folks go, well, that was really hard to do back then. Just because you're using that tool doesn't mean you're a good 3D animator or modeler.
Who
you should
says
learn
that?
I guess I've seen it on Twitter and Facebook and communities where people just put their work online and compare it. Something like SoundCloud, but for 3D modeling. And a good question is whether that is valuable or genuine criticism, or whether that is just baseless criticism. I myself am of the mindset of just let go. Sometimes the tools those other people use to create something faster are just better for the purpose. And if you don't think that's the case, then why are you bothered so much? Because their work does not decrease the value of yours.
Well, is that so? Because that might exactly be the point where it starts to get annoying. I don't really mind that other people have other ways of working and accomplish different things, but I think it might be really annoying that that you really like master a craft. So not only like know how to use a tool, but also know why that tool is made, what the thought processes behind that are, and the whole gajam. Now you make something with that, and then somebody who really hasn't a clue and just use presets like also like when you use a preset from an artistic like the artistry involved, who is making the work? Is it like the person who clicked that preset, or is the guy who made the preset? So in a sense, if you make use of these like completely sort of standardized and easy to use tools, I think it's a valid point to ask, like, okay, but who made this work? Are you really the author of your work? If you use that tool, are you the author of this work, or is it?
But they all stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, you use Super Collider, which is a very involved tool, and you have to have a lot of knowledge to do anything with that kind of tool. But you have a lot of creative freedom there. But Super Collider is still made by somebody else, and it runs on a computer that's still made by somebody else. And there's millions and billions of years of evolution before that, so you can never truly claim the thing as your own. So there's a varying scale to which you are.
Yeah, but I'm using Super Collider, but I'm well aware of the fact that there's this whole code underneath that makes it work, and I'm aware of. I'm aware. I'm not aware of all, but at least some of the design choices, and I mean, I've like very good reasons of like why I'm doing this. I thought about it, and it's a sort of informed choice. Compare that to somebody who just, takes a few samples, runs it through some presets of some synthesizer somebody else used, doesn't care about how that's made or why it's made, just, hey, this sounds pretty cool. And to have these two worlds like having to compete for the same, like being measured by the same rulers is weird, because it feels like there's two completely different crafts being developed, but it's being judged in the same way.
Okay, but I don't think that's necessarily different now than it was 20 years ago.
No.
Or 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a little understanding of the craft that goes into the work, then you're probably going to have a tough time understanding it, but you're going to compare works to works that you do know and judge them on that basis. So with regards to the topic of having to reevaluate artistic qualities, I'm not so sure that we have to do that.
It's just the same stuff happening.
It's the same set of principles, sort of. Because this problem of, because some people here raise the issue of that there are two sides, the instrument builder and the player. So it has been this ancient problem. Okay, I'm taking it to the extreme, I'm playing on the piano, but who made the piano? The person who made the piano is also part of my sound.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In a way.
There's tremendous.
So the person who scripted, I don't know, some sequencer is also part of my creative process and my products. But this issue of authorship that we brought up, it's always there. It's always a side of the prism. It's always there because.
I mean, it's impossible to make something that's not influenced by your surroundings.
No. But that's not where I'm sort of.
But I guess like the artistic quality, regardless of which tool you use, is whether or not you can use it in a kind of original way that engages people in such a way that it, I don't know, like opens something new up for them, whatever that may be. It might be emotional, it might be some concept that they weren't aware of, they might listen to something that's new. And I think I don't see a problem there what kind of tool you use or someone uses.
I have a little thought experiment. Just to draw some people out of their shell, maybe, or to provoke. I'm going to build an online database which compares authors and their work on how much ownership you have, which you cannot say, I have 1,001 ownership over something, but perhaps you can compare people. You can say, well, I have twice as much ownership because I use a tool that has twice as much creative freedom. The possibility space of this tool is just bigger than yours. So you get ranked on how much creative ownership you have over the work. And you get this list. Do you feel better if you're high up on that list? Would you like that tool so you can say, no, look, my work is better because I have about twice as much ownership over my work than you do, because you use Fruity Loops and I use Super Collider? Or is it something else?
No, because the reason why I am using something like Super Collider and compared to more like standardized or like ready-made stuff is not because I want like pats on the back, like, hey, that's really cool, but it's for design purposes. It's because
that you have a personal interest in design. You enjoy the process of making.
I just realized that having more control over your design process gives you more options and more flexibility and more gives you more control of what in fact you're saying.
Okay. Well, I'm just making sure that the dissatisfaction is not because they use inferior tools and that's it.
No, it's not about inferior tools, because I'm really in favor of using those tools if they're appropriate. As Maria also pointed out, I'm really in favor of that. If you just find out that there's an app that does exactly what you need, why would you code it yourself? There's no reason to it.
Here's an interesting question then. If you have this artistic idea for a project that you want to do, and then you figure out halfway through the project that there's an app that makes your process easier by a tenfold, do you then still find that project worthwhile? Or do you think because the app is there, well, this has already been done, mostly?
No, usually not, because for me, it's never like, oh, this is a new technology, so I have to use it. That's not the sort of concepts I'm going for. I'm more into wanting to sort of have some ideas that I want to get across, or have some concepts that I want to show to people, and I find tools that enable me to communicate that. So if I find a different tool that makes that easier, that's just wonderful. I still might code it, and that's due to for educational purposes, because I want to know how it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to know like what's under the hood, because that's something I do find important. You have to know what's under the hood before you can make informed choices about why it's the best tool. And if it's the best tool out there, it doesn't mean that it couldn't still be improved upon.
Well, this sort of connects to what Yaniv said, that the instrument builder is usually also playing the instrument. It comes back to your point that you need control over what you create, so you make your own instruments that then you play them.
Yeah.
But if you had an app, as Martijn said, that offers the same result, but it doesn't offer you control over that result, then you wouldn't use it.
Wait, one more time? Sorry.
If you had an app that sort of creates the same result, the same sound, the same effect on the sound, but you don't have absolute control on all the parameters.
Well, then it depends. Like if it's enough control to get what I need, then it's fine. If not, I might abandon it. Like for one project, I was working with self-organized maps, and I first looked around like what's there to use, like easily implementable. Found some stuff, work with it, but I just couldn't get it to do exactly what I wanted. So I tossed it out and wrote it myself to have the level of control that I wanted to have, and to be able to really understand like what's going on. But yeah, usually it's like, okay, if there's a tool for it, like why not use the shoulders of the giants? But I-
think.
Because
But I do personally, like if I went to a concert and there were like two acts playing, was a pianist that played somebody else's piece, and somebody else who designed and built his own instrument and composed something for it himself and performed that, I would judge the two completely different, like with completely different sets of expectations, and because in the digital world it's less obvious, like it's less visible, because it's code that's running, and it's harder to see if it's somebody else's code or your own code, because it's like it's virtual thing. I mean, in those physical, in the physical world, if you saw those type of differences, you would take that into account in a way that you judge it or appreciate it. And in the fast digital world, you don't really see that anymore. You don't know if something is downloaded and used or something is thought out and conceptualized and prototyped, and you know.
So again, their process is really important.
Well,
to be
it's
visualized.
for me. It's important if when I'm looking at things. I do look at things differently if I know that there's a different process behind it.
it's interesting that this came up, that to expose the internal workings of an instrument or a piece or a work, it adds value to it, in a sense.
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
Mm.
It's something from my own work that I try to do to make sure that everybody who wants to see can see what's going on in my head, because it does add value.
But we have a lot of comments around, like which all refer to the other end, to the ready-made. Mark asks, how does this translate to programming and libraries? How do those two ends connect to this discussion?
I think it's very analogous.
Mm-hmm.
You can, with programming, same thing. You can program your entire program in assembly language, and you'll have pretty much done it from scratch. But you could also use processing with thousands of libraries plugged in and barely have to do any coding.
Why would you
the
choose
aesthetics? And I think the aesthetics are kind of the same as using these tools to create audio.
But I need to pose the question, like, why would you choose the libraries then? Why would you choose the ready-made?
Well,
Convenience.
no, I think it's again like if the tool does what you need it to do, then yeah, if I need to get that nail into the wall, why not use that hammer?
And not make my own.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
need to
but
make a new hammer.
in like game design, if you have like ready-made models or whatever.
Ready-made plugins and software is used pretty extensively. The idea being there that you use libraries to do stuff that is not essential to the concept of your game, that does not limit or overly define what you can do with the concept of the game and what you cannot. Again, that means you have to pick and choose the libraries carefully so that they match the concept that you have in your head. But it's the same thing. You pick and choose the tools that you need. There is now also a debate in the game design world, because there's so much tools you can also use to click and drag your game together, on whether that's artistically valid. And again, the same conclusions can be reached.
And you were gonna say?
Well, I guess it's partly like also depends on what that library is doing. I mean, if that library is interfacing with a very specific serial protocol that if you would write it yourself, you would probably do it the same way anyways, because that's how it's specified, how you should interact with that device. Then you just use like that thing that someone made, spend the time testing and troubleshooting. And if you find it's much more valuable if you find like, oh, actually there's still a little bug here, I fix it, give the bug, give the fixed version back to the world. I think that's much more effective. Of course, the moment you are sort of embedding like your way of working into libraries, and there's a lot of like super collider extensions that are like very specific ways of how people use certain things. And there you really have to see like, well, am I gonna like do something that's kind of in the just-in-time coding people style, or am I going to do things the way James Harkins does them, or am I going to do them the way Felix does them? Like there you choose which like.
But again, that choice already takes like before you can make that choice, you already have to sort of really dive into your art and get to a point where those choices become relevant. I mean, somebody who starts out super gliding for 3 days isn't going to think, well, I'm going to go to the just-in-time programming way or the... No, it's just... unless you're talking about Jonathan Huis.
Well, Jonathan has a...
He started out writing Eugens.
computer programming or...
But I don't know. The problem here is that there's on this table a group of professionals that they talk about these tools and about these ready-mades and about these processes from a professional's perspective. And I think it's interesting that Pinar points out that people, I think she means like normal people or amateurs. Where is it? They cannot cope with so much info, and they learn to like what's best or fast promoted. Yeah. So I sort of see this kind of distinction again between the amateur who entertains a small family or he's doing a hobby, and the professional who is designing high-end kind of products or is delivering high-quality works. So this discussion is keeps revolving around how professional deals with these processes, and of course you need more detail and more control and more flexibility in your tools. So sometimes you have to make them yourself. So there's this distinction, I think, again, going back to intention, going back to use, to the user. The professionals as users are more demanding than the users who are not going for that kind of quality, I think.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I also noticed that I have the feeling that, in fear of sounding like an old man, like nowadays, I see this trend where these programs that used to deliver like a lot of control to like professional users are starting to dumb down their programs.
To what?
To sort of invite like the semi-pros or amateurs or to more easily use their programs. And
Can you give examples?
I think the one of the most famous ones from those examples is from the video editing. Which one was it? After Effects or something?
Could be.
There was this new version released, and all the like.
I think Apple bought that. Yeah?
Could be. I don't know.
They have something else in mind.
Yeah, but also like I think Logic from. Oh, that's also Apple. It's like I've heard that the plans are to sort of slowly turn it into sort of GarageBand Pro thing, like where it's much more directed at the click and drag, drag your own composition together idea. And all in all, like when I started out, you wanted to write a track on a computer, you had to make a lot of, you had to do quite a bit of work to set things up. And right now, with whatever program you choose, you start up the program, and a lot of stuff is already filled in, and you don't even have to make use of that. But like the BPM is already like set on this, and the time signature is already set on 4/4. And a lot of these, I mean, there are much more. Also, if you load in a plugin like a VST plugin, there's already a sound.
But what are you scared of with that trend?
Well, that laziness is
tape,
being. What?
You didn't splice tape.
I started out on tape. I didn't splice it, but I did
Yeah,
use like a
you
4-tracker.
your edits on tape. Then if you screwed up, you had to go out and buy a new.
Well, I have a tape machine quarter-inch.
But why are you afraid of it?
Why is you sound like you are scared, like something will happen to the users of this future version of Logic.
The secret will go out or something.
Yeah, or that like the program, they themselves will be dumbed down. Or I'm just trying to guess at what you are afraid of.
Well, maybe that's exactly what I'm afraid of. That it sort of takes away the sort of takes away some of the curiosity and some of the awareness of what.
This also connects to what Mark commented. He talks about the idea of possibility space. It's like when you have a more flexible tool, you have more space to explore, and it connects to that. It's like if you have a software that is really rigid and has a lot of presets in it, it really affects the way you think and the way you will interact with it. Therefore, it affects the work.
Maybe I just think that it's a shame. Like it's that on the one hand, it might draw in a lot of people. Like because it's easy, so it's a really small step to get started, but I think it will end up delivering just a lot of stuff that's sort of similar and sort of like, in the end, not really worthwhile.
But then, what is the goal of the new version of Logic that is more like GarageBand? Isn't it more set up to be to do the same stuff like GarageBand does, but maybe be the next step up from GarageBand?
Well, I think like the intent is more like to sell a lot of products, and they don't care if it's used afterwards.
For Mark,
that's not where the money lies.
For Mark, it's like
it's already made.
I'm sorry. For Mark, it's because mainly Apple is focusing less on pro users and more on enabling everyone to do everything.
Yeah.
So it's also like a marketing kind of approach.
Usually with these software packages, you have this feature set, and 90% of the users use 10% of the features. And after a while, you start thinking, look, we could make this more complicated, but that's not going to expand our user base. And we could throw away maybe 30 to 40 to 50% of these features that absolutely nobody but you uses. And reach more people that way. And then the question is, does this reduced feature set allow people to do less or more? I think it'll allow some people to do less. I think it'll allow a lot of people to do more. Because there's less clutter, there's less in the way. You can find what you need faster.
But it's also like most people need to do less, so you put less things in their way, and you make the product more attractive, more usable. Like Pinar says, Apple is the master of one button interaction.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm just that idea of a one button interaction really does pose limitations on like if you go from an artistic point of view, when I create something like an artwork,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I do is really conceptualize, like, okay, what do I want to get across? Like, what is it that I want to communicate here? And after that whole thing is gone, then I'm gonna find the tools, and after that it starts to take shape.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the feeling that these tools are sort of luring a lot of people into, well, just start up the program and mess around a bit, and we'll see where it ends up. And I'm not saying that either one is the preferred way of working, but I am saying that there's yeah.
So you're making this distinction between top-down and bottom-up approaches to making something.
It seems
where
like
you're
one is
very much
one is
top-down, and you're afraid that all these people will just go bottom-up, and that's it.
Maybe.
No, I think the bottom.
I mean, is it? I mean, quite a few compositions come out of improvisation. Does that make them worse than
I think all of
compositions which
technology
are
comes out
first
of that.
theoretically like conceptualized and?
I
mean, the music
think
might be
both.
better.
I think both have a lot of value, but I think one is like being marketed because it's like it's easy to sell. It's like you just 3 clicks and you already have something going. It's easier to sell than, well, before you start using this, maybe first open a text editor and think up some.
Yeah, but it can't work that way, or at least not for a beginner. So I understand the approach. This is more of an educationally valuable tool than one where you have to first write down your grand plan and then implement it in one go.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have this certain level of bottom-up experience to get familiar with the tools, to know the possibility space before you can even have an idea of how to navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to happen first.
Yeah.
I like how Yaniv says it's like making something with clay and shaping it up. It's like the clay is rising on the potter's wheel.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of this bottom-up kind of approach. You have this information, these tools, these skills that you can use, and you have a concept. And the concept sort of magnetizes the tools you want to use, and it shapes something up. Which is the difference with the tops-down approach. When you have a consumer meeting with GarageBand, and okay, you cannot go deep on that. You'll just use what you have and then go away.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
What I think is also important is the way these tools help to shape your thought in a really positive manner. I'm very convinced that a lot of the stuff that I make is very much inspired by the direction that the tools show me once I've built a basic structure. That gives me inspiration, so it becomes a kind of dialogue between what I make and what the program then does. And without that, I think creating anything would be really hard.
Mm.
And that's the case in anything. That's the case for Super Collider and GarageBand, I think. But you can structure software in a way that either enables that or prohibits it, or at least discourages it. I'm very much a fan of software that actually does this.
Just allow you
to work iteratively instead of just thinking out the grand design in Notepad or on paper and then building it in one go. That rarely works for me.
Yeah, well, I must admit that I do sketch a lot as well.
Mark points out that people who are interested in the inner workings will get into it anyway, relating to the commercial and entrepreneurial kind of approach. And I kind of agree with that. It's like if you are into making tools, you will make them anyway, despite what Apple releases. You know.
Yes.
You're gonna find the way to get that control over your process, especially if you're really enjoying making on that level.
So then in the end, what matters is just your level of curiosity about something, and not so much what the tools have to offer you.
There's also originality It's like you cannot be that original using GarageBand or Fruity Loops, whatever it's called, and all those ready-mades, which is, from an artistic point of view, is like the thing you're always after, being original, being authentic. So if you're using ready-made tools, you cannot be authentic, expressive.
I think you can be. I think you might be tempted to dismiss stuff like GarageBand or Fruity Loops as something that is really limited in scope. But really, GarageBand is just a multi-track recording software with multiple effect units on each track and some mixing and mastering. But then there's the microphone at some end, and then all of sound that you can do and record with that microphone, whatever you think of. I don't think that necessarily limits you.
It's but it gets to a point where it's sort of dependent on to what degree an artist can shape the tool into doing what it needs to be done. So you have to make the tool your own, and then you can maybe express what you need to express with it. So you can be authentic using like GarageBand, but you have to go beyond the sort of step-by-step thing that the program wants you to do.
Yeah, because again, the tool affects the product. So there's like an amount of things you can do on GarageBand. After that, you need to make a new tool by yourself to that approach.
Yeah, so in that regard, it might even be so that people will dive into building the tool faster because the stuff they're being offered is so quite limited.
I think it's worth considering the level of abstraction at which you're working. If you look at the technology you're using, you have all these different levels. You have electricity, you have bits and bytes, you have registers, you have RAM, you have hard disks, you have microphones, you have monitor speakers. But you're most likely not working at that level. So anything on that level that does the job will do. It will not influence the artistic thoughts that you have. But go up enough levels, and at a certain point the tools start to matter. And it's important to know at which level of abstraction that is.
Yeah. I think it's, for most people, they start to use like very at the top end. Then probably at a certain point it's come to a point where it's like, okay, I want to do this, but this tool is not allowing me to. So for a long time you were just hitting nails with a hammer, and then suddenly you get a screw and you're like,
this is working.
This is really working, and then you have to dive deeper and see. So there's a larger tool set, and after a while, it's really about the level of control that you want as
which
an
you
artist.
discover as a bottom-up process.
You rarely start by looking at zeros and ones and decide, okay.
Replay
I think I wanted to use these zeros and ones to make my sound. It's will be interesting.
No, it's interesting to see that. Well, the tool doesn't matter that much, because if you are curious enough, you will find alternative ways to use it, and then you will be quite creative. But Pinar here says that people that are like hardcore users, artists or craftspeople, get worried because that kind of approach is stealing our market share.
Yeah, and that's a really valid point, by the way. I've seen it happen in photography. Back when I was studying from 2000 to 2004, it's around the same area where digital photography sort of started to kick in.
It's like everyone became a photographer, right?
It killed the industry, basically. I mean, a lot of people just lost their jobs, because why would you want your wedding photographed by somebody asking a lot of money when your niece has the school camera and
Yeah.
she's there anyway.
But is that bad?
For a lot of things, yes. For the quality of wedding registrations, it's not been very well.
Do those people mind?
Also, like for years, I haven't been able to.
Looking at your wedding photos?
I don't have any, fortunately. For a while, I haven't been able to go to photography exhibits because of the absolute terrible. Like they're still using the sizes of the analog photography, but the megapixels hadn't quite caught up yet. So for years, you go to like galleries to look at photography, and they had like these terrible prints, huge pixels everywhere, and I don't know. It was just it really killed photography for a few years. Right now, it's sort of caught up again.
Okay. But now that it's caught up, is it still an issue that analog photography is no longer as big as digital photography? Or was it just the transitional period that you had a problem with? Yeah,
Do you need help with that?
Probably.
Shall I?
Oh, it's one of those.
You need to go deeper in the process.
You sound like you know your stuff.
So we now have
It's just a hype.
Well,
we have a tool here.
I need to redesign this tool. I can.
I need to build it myself with my 3D printer. And then
I
you'll
was
go,
told
but
this
3D
is
printers
a
are not
pro.
high resolution enough.
Well, on a more funny note, Mark says that Thijs' comments remind me of academic sound art education, where people first read for 4 years before creating.
Yes!
But also Pinar pointed out, like, connecting back to the people losing their jobs in photography.
Mm-hmm.
Like, artists need to learn how to do business better. How they need to, promote?
Market. You need
Good artists and crafters in the long term will have to learn to promote their work as well. Because some people worry that their works won't be recognized enough to make a living from, art included. No, that's something else. Visibility is the key, much like making things accessible. Same mechanics, really. Yeah, artists need to learn business. Yep.
On the one hand, it seems to be necessary. On the other hand, there's this doing business is an entire field, and it's not really connected.
No, I think it's not so much finance or finding a demographic or making elaborate charts to chart your income and see where you're going business-wise. I think it's more marketing, how to communicate your stuff really well.
That's the new aesthetic, Pinar says. To learn to make business, to market. The new aesthetic.
I must say that there have been like a lot of artists that are sort of in this mindset of, well, if I just continue to make art, it will sell itself in some way. So I don't really agree with that, because I think you need to have a communication going with an audience, and that is basically a part of marketing, I think.
Well, marketing comes with value, and value comes with quality. Yes, please. So, why are we afraid as makers that the value of our work is gonna drop if so many people have access to these kind of tools?
I'm not afraid.
Why not?
Well, I try to take the approach that Pinar suggests in really trying to communicate to people what my intentions are, which is valuable marketing material in that I connect with them and they learn to share my vision. They learn to see things my way.
Who are these people? What kind of...
this is,
are they just users or
this is with
your
regards
teachers?
to the game that I'm creating. I have my ideals about that not everybody is familiar with, but I get a lot of questions about that a lot of people at first don't seem to get. So I put on my marketing hat and I do a sales pitch. I tell them why my work is valuable or why I think it is, and then they at least can form their own picture. But I have to sort of educate them. I have to teach them some aspects of what I find important, without which they might not be able to connect, and with which they
do you
might
think
be able to.
that approach works with every form of art?
I think so. I mean, whatever complicated and abstract thing you come up with, that didn't just come out of thin air. That took a process of learning, of formulating opinions, of living. And without that process, you can't really expect somebody to be able to relate to it. So I think at some point, marketing and, to rephrase it, education comes into play. And if you want people to connect with your work, I think that's also your responsibility.
It seems to me that like mystifying has been sort of different strategy for the same means to get people interested in your work. You sort of mystify it.
That can work.
Well, I guess that's also maybe what part of the media hype that John is referring to is this thing about a lot of like gadgets and cool effects and whatever is sort of mystifying the technology in a way to the users or
it's hidden.
the general public, and sort of not showing like what is actually behind that.
But you still need some common ground in order to relate to it. Whereas with music, if you really do not know how to relate to a piece, it sounds like noise. And then you can hype it up as much as you want, but it'll still sound like very unpleasant sounds to somebody who's not familiar with it. So you still need to get to a certain level before you can do hype like that, I think.
And it's also an issue of whom are you addressing to? It's like if you're trying to convince a committee to give you a subsidy is different from trying to make people buy your app, from trying to convince a group of peers, like makers and collaborators, that an idea really works. So it's really branching out to different things. And well, if something it has a quality enough to convince your collaborators, it will convince the common user, whatever that is defined socially, I don't know. So maybe we shouldn't judge with what with non-professionals think in terms of quality, but rather try to achieve this high standard of professional quality, and it will reflect more to others as well. Because throughout there's this confusion about who's the user, who's the who am I addressing to, who am I trying to sell. So maybe there should be this kind of standard for quality, for innovation, for...
Yeah, I'm actually thinking of, I mean, one of the things that I'm doing, that I made this, was one of the co-authors of this wireless sensing platform, connected to an infrastructure to share data between applications. And the next step in that is also sort of providing methods of dealing with real-time data. One of the reasons why I think it's important to have these tools like available and accessible um, is that I see that there are a lot of interactive works out there that are just so because the people who made them are so much struggling with getting the technology working that they have no time at all to actually work on the artistic functionality or interaction.
So before they can work at their level.
Before they can actually work on what can this interaction actually like give artistically, and does this work artistically? They are still struggling too much with
the toys.
The code doesn't work.
Yeah.
Does this technology work? And I think that's like, people need these tools to actually start exploring like what is it actually, what is interaction, and what is, how can you actually make something that makes artistic sense.
Is it for you relevant or important that the audience sort of knows how your gadgets work? The technical part works for the work to be successful or not?
Well, I don't think it's important for the audience to know how the technology works. What is important is that the piece makes sense, that it is engaging, on a level that's beyond the technical. I mean, I've seen like terrible pieces where this was some piece in Montreal where it was kind of a performance installation. And before I went in, I asked like, okay, what's going to happen? And I got a very technical description of like, well, you're gonna go into a space, and there's gonna be a person wearing a costume, and you can interact with that. I was like, and then the space, like the way it was designed was like visually, like really like a different space, like not an everyday space. So what I would have wanted as an introduction was like a story, a narrative, like this is what this like this is a different world you're stepping into, and this is your role in it.
But instead you got a rather technical description.
Yeah, and I was like, well,
not really enticing.
Why am I in this space? What does this space have to do with me? Like, what does this space want to tell me?
Isn't that a kind of mystifying again? Creating a story that sort of blankets the technology?
No, I think
it's more about what the artist wants to convey.
It's like if you wanna if you create a space and it's clearly like that is really different from everyday life, then apparently you want to say something about some other place that's different from our everyday world. And if you want to engage an audience to be a participant, an actor in your interactive work, I think you need to give them a role. And I've seen I saw another piece where this was slightly like the start was done better. Like you were like brought into a space. There was some kind of ritualistic initiation, and then you were brought to a next space. But then the problem, what happened was that the actors that were in there, they completely ignored the audience. I was like, well, that also doesn't make sense. And I really liked the piece for like the kind of atmosphere and the kind of strange, kind of oppressive world that it was sort of portraying. But the fact that I couldn't interact with the actors because they were just doing their thing and not reacting on what came back. I was like, well,
It's a missed opportunity.
that's a missed opportunity. That's like not doing it all the way.
Mm. Mm.
In the first example, it sounds like they confused means and ends, where you have technical means or technical details. I'm using an actor and we created this environment, and they sort of brought that up as if that was the goal, as if that was the theme.
Yeah.
Whereas you suspect that there's a higher level goal to which these things serve.
Yeah.
And if there was, then they didn't communicate that clearly, and then I guess it was a bad piece. Or that wasn't there, and the goal was just the technology that they used or the system that they created, in which case it's perhaps also not very interesting.
Yeah.
And in the second, they had a very clear idea, but they failed to use the interactive medium successfully.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point where maybe you could have sat in the audience somewhere more like in a traditional theater play.
Yeah.
Well, some people here, some comments. Pinar says that
People will keep making bad stuff. That's true.
yeah,
That's good.
You need a target group to show your art in whichever form it is, whether that is 5 people or 5,000 or a billion. You have to make sure that they know that good work is there, because shit makers are not stopping; they are promoting non-stop. If you're an artist as a maker, know what good is, speak it out, and that is business. And also Mark points out that your point, Mariah, was very good point in capitals about mystifying, about how some tools are like mystified and you don't know what it works. And that's why education is important with 5 A's. But
that's also, I mean, it's a general issue with innovation, and where a lot of it, like in Dutch you say schijninnovatie, it's like a fake innovation. Like it looks like it's an innovation, but actually it's doing the same that it was doing before. It just has a new design,
new jacket,
visual.
better marketing.
Yeah, I mean, my phone looks perfectly fine, but. Yeah, it's not an innovation that suddenly the buttons are round instead of square.
No, it's more like a remodeling.
I mean, there's a lot of that going on at the moment.
I think there's also a subtle thing there that is actually making a difference. These, especially the Apple products, making stuff simpler and simpler. Sure, it's still calling people, and sure, it's still email, and sure, it's still Facebook communication, but in making it more accessible and more easy, I start doing it more, I start using it more, and that changes the quality of how I'm communicating with people. It's still the same media that I'm using, but because I use it in a slightly different way, the character can change.
I'm not sure what Mark means when he says about a comment I made. This will make it elitist again. It's okay as long as you can explain what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the discussion there briefly was aesthetics and using the word good. And Pinar said you have to be very sure of your own set of aesthetics, and you have to be sure that your audience is at the same level, that they also appreciate and understand your aesthetics, and that you have a common idea of what good and bad are. And as long as you have that, it's good. And then the downside of that, Mark, I think, points out is that you can get elitism, because you get these groups that share
and about the peer group. People on
the outside think, what the hell are you talking about? That sounds like
No, I'm not against education in that sense, but But it's like I think it's better if you strive for that higher level of quality in what you do, and then expose it to people. Through education, of course, that's not a problem. I'm not saying that we have to be hiding in our ivory towers and making art and then mystifying and selling it as mumbo jumbo and super duper design or whatever.
But isn't it also like that there's quite a big difference between like slow and fast processes, like in creating art or thinking about art, like and all these media hype things, new tools, apps, whatever, are really sort of focused on the sort of immediate gratification, like get results within 15 minutes or faster, and that sort of downplays the sort of thought process as you go through in art that requires like long, deep thought, like the really sort of more contemplative and not aimed at the okay, let's make a track in 15 minutes, but like okay, perhaps it will take half a year before I write my first note.
Yeah, there are some things that you will only be able to do through such a long and laborious and intensive process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of like, because we're living in an age where information and where everything is going like really fast, I'm sort of wondering what kind of effect it has on the sort of, the long thought. Like, I can almost not imagine a project right now where I'll be like, okay, well, I'm first gonna go to a mountain, sit there and think about this for half a year, and I'll get back to you. There's just no way. This just doesn't exist. Everything's tailored for, okay, I want it yesterday.
But that...
And here you have a tool, you can do it in 15 minutes. So
I
just
think
send it to
that's
me.
been happening not just in the last 5 to 10 years,
No.
but throughout the last 1,000 years. Where first it would take, I don't know, it would take a century to build a cathedral. Now you can do it in a week if you really want to.
Yeah.
Well, they're still
If a
working
Chinese
on
company would take
this
it.
cathedral in Barcelona.
So I think in a
It's
very,
a different quality though.
it's
Yeah,
about
but yeah.
technology that's the case.
Yeah, but and I do think that there's a lot of value in not like, I think there's value in the sort of slow approach, and it yields different results also. It's not like, I don't think it's like taking half a year and coming up with the exact same result. It's really like new layers can be reached that way, and innovations can happen that way. And I have the feeling that these tools are sort of steering away from that and are more like, well, you know, you can do something really cool in a really short time. So why even bother?
I'm not sure. Just because
I'm
you
not
can
sure
build
either.
a cathedral in a week doesn't mean no great buildings are produced any longer. But cathedrals, that stopped somewhat.
Yeah, but it's like there are these what are seven, like the 7 big things humans made in the past.
7 miracles.
Is there anything
Wonders.
from this
Wonders.
century that's gonna like be among those one day?
Well, not among those, but there will be different sets. It's not like great classics are written anymore. It's not like great buildings aren't being built anymore. But they have most likely use a different set of aesthetics. And I think further down the road we will recognize some of them as really groundbreaking and comparable to those works. But
because
it's
remember,
time.
like the 7.
I think we don't know all the shit that they produced back then.
Some of that has just
Because like the 7 wonders of the world were like a list that someone found in some ancient book, It's like it was like
No,
defined by other things. I
I
don't
mean
know.
also in terms of like music. I mean we don't know like from the classic periods what kind of shit was all produced. And
No,
that's
of
just,
course.
we
I
didn't
think there were loads
keep
of
it
people
around.
playing on their harpsichord producing absolute nonsense that we haven't heard of.
Which would probably be cool right now.
But I think it's to come back to that fast result, kind of not taking it slow. By the way, Mark is doing some slow cooking at the moment, he says.
Yeah, you have fast food versus slow food.
Fast food, slow fashion they have now, like slow
Well,
fashion.
we made pretty fast food.
It was awesome.
It was awesome. But I wanted to say it's this kind of hipster aesthetic, like I want it and I want it now, and I don't care about the background of, you know, fashion or a book. Or it's like I only need like the surface so that I can sort of pose in a certain way, but I don't need the what's below. It's like because the fashion is gonna change in 2 years, and I don't wanna, you know what I mean? It's like you are sliding on the surface. You don't break through because it doesn't matter. You can fake it. You can be cool. Even if you're not going deep.
And that is like what you said, you can fake it. And you can fake it in such a way that nobody will ever know the difference. Or the casual observer will not see the difference.
Like
You can pose
that film by Banksy, where you have this fake fraud artist who makes complete nonsense, hangs it in a gallery and sells it for tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars, and people come to see it, mostly hipsters, and they can't distinguish his trash from real art anymore.
Take a break. I don't know if she left.
I think a break is a good idea.
Yeah, we should take a break because Pinar wants to say goodbye. She has to leave.
Mm-hmm. She's even
and she's hungry.
actually here. We miss you, Pinar.
Hey,
Yeah.
Nina joined us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Shall we say we take a 15-minute air break or something?
Air.
Air break. Yeah,
I mean, none of us are smokers, right?
No.
I smoke.
I do.
Well,
it's
we
like
actually have smokers.
two smokers. You can go for
Let's do
air.
a smoking break then.
Yeah, we didn't get any snacks. I hope that's not a problem.
No, yeah.
No, it's okay.
I had some terrible fast food on the way here, so I'm saturated.
I think I can provide fruit and stuff.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, we're taking a break.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye, Pinar.
Bye, Pinar. Welcome,
Yeah.
Nina. We'll be
See
right
you.
back.
We'll be right back, yeah.
2 hours and a half? We haven't been talking that much.